All right, I want to welcome everyone this afternoon to today's webinar. Today's webinar is sponsored by the American College of Veterinary Preventive Medicine and its partner organizations, the National Association of Federal Veterinarians, the American Association of Food Safety and Public Health Veterinarians, the National Association of State Public Health Veterinarians, and the U.S. Animal Health Association. It's my pleasure today to welcome Dr. Sarah COPEG. Dr. COPEG is a Florida native, graduating with her DVM from the University of Florida College of Veterinary Medicine in 2013, and subsequently graduating with a PhD in pathobiology, specifically epidemiology, from Kansas State University in 2016. After spending several years as a research assistant professor for the Texas A&M University System, she joined the Texas Animal Health Commission in 2022 as a field epidemiologist covering all reportable diseases in all livestock species in 122 counties in Texas. She achieved ACVPM diplomate status in 2022 and epidemiology specialty status in 2023. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Sarah COPEG.
All right, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with y'all this afternoon on New World Screwworm. It's a topic that's received a lot of attention here lately, for good reason. We're going to start by giving you an introduction to what New World Screwworm is, including life cycle and transmission, the history of the U.S. New World Screwworm Eradication Program, the purpose and accomplishments of COPEG, which has been integral to the eradication of screwworm and keeping it farther south in South America. We're reviewing the current New World Screwworm situation, as well as the current eradication and prevention efforts south of the border, and our current preparedness efforts here in the state of Texas. So, starting off, New World screwworms are actually the larvae or maggots of New World screwworm flies that burrow or screw into the living tissue of animals. And as you can see, they often create quite extensive wounds, and ultimately, if left untreated, often wind up killing the animal. Unfortunately for us, the fact that they have a very wide host range really complicates their eradication and control efforts. So I have pictured here for an example, deer, wildlife can be affected, horses, cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, poultry, or wild birds can also be affected by New World screwworms, as well as people and small animals, pets. The life cycle of New World screwworms has a few things that helps us in the control. The adults live for about 10 to 14 days, and one of the key things that helps us in controlling screwworms is that the females only mate once. They can lay eggs several times, but they're only going to mate with one male, which is where the sterile insect technique comes in, and we're going to talk more about that later. The females are going to oviposition on or near a wound or mucous membranes at around the 7th to 9th day of life, and then those eggs are going to hatch within 12 to 14 hours, depending on the temperature. The larvae are then going to burrow into the wound and eat the living flesh of the animal for about 5 to 7 days as they move through L1, L2, and L3 stages. Then they're going to drop off the animal and pupate for about 6 to 8 days, again, depending on temperature, before they emerge as adult flies once again. As I mentioned, their life cycle does vary. In cool climates, it can take up to 2 to 3 months for that life cycle to complete. And then in temperate climates, the life cycle can last for approximately 24 days. Whereas when you get into tropical climates, the life cycle can be as short as 18 days. From a transmission standpoint, the female flies are going to deposit eggs around wounds that can be as small as a tick bite. Okay, so it does not have to be a dramatic wound in order to be infested with New World screwworm flies. Unfortunately for us, it doesn't have to be a wound at all. They will lay their eggs in mucous membrane openings such as the nose, eyes, ears, anus, genitalia, or especially they like the umbilicus of newborn animals. So larvae, once they hatch from those eggs, they're going to enter the wound and they feed on that living tissue, and that distinguishes New World screwworm flies from ordinary maggots. Most maggots are going to feed on dead tissue. These like living tissue. Unfortunately, when the New World screwworms enter the wound and start feeding on that tissue, they create an environment that attracts other flies to come in and lay their eggs, which means that we can have multiple infestations in a single wound. Um, so you can have different types of larvae within the wounds, and it's very important whenever you see a wound with larvae to really explore the wound and make sure you try to collect larvae from each area of the wound. Again, those screwworm larvae, they burrow down, so they're often at the bottom of the wound, not up at the top. So you can't just pick off maggots from the top of a wound and expect to necessarily find the New World screwworm maggots. Fortunately for us, they're not directly contagious animal to animal, but unfortunately, New World screwworm flies can travel long distances up to 10 to 20 kilometers or 6.2 to 12.4 miles. And the movement of infested livestock, pets, wildlife, or humans could lead to spread over even longer distances. As we all know, animals and people move um, rapidly in this day and age, right? And so that can definitely be a complicating factor. Clinical signs of New World screwworm infestation can be pretty dramatic. Larvae are visible in the wound by day 3, and there can be hundreds of larvae in the wounds. They can be up to 17 millimeters long, and you'll often see bloody discharge and may notice a foul odor from the wound. And while everyone kind of looks and points to these really dramatic wounds as kind of the hallmark of a New World screwworm infection, they actually can the animals can present with a relatively small wound that's actually pretty deep. Again, these larvae burrow, and they can create these deep infested pockets under the skin. So it's very important that when we're examining animals and looking for New World screwworms, that we really explore the wounds and make sure we get all the way down into the wounds. Animals can be depressed, off feed, separate from the herd, or self isolate. You may see some head shaking depending on where the wound or infestation is, but do remember no wound is actually technically required. From a morbidity and mortality standpoint, it does vary depending on the age of the animal, where the wound is, how infected it is. Animals often do become systemically ill from secondary bacterial infections as a result of these massive wounds that get created. But treatment with parasiticides can be very successful if detected early. The key is to detect it early. Similarly, from a mortality standpoint, it depends if you find the wound and get it treated. Animals often recover, but if left untreated, these infestations are usually fatal within 7 to 14 days and are nearly 100% of newborns that are infested, for example, in the umbilicus, wind up dying. From a general management standpoint, preventative measures include trying to limit practices that might result in wounds or environments that are favorable for New World screwworm flies. So schedule birthing of animals to coincide with cooler months when flies are at a minimum. Routinely inspect livestock for maggots, whether in pastures, pens, or prior to or post transportation. And for horses, make sure you consult with a veterinarian to perform preputial inspections on geldings and stallions. And again, choosing those cooler months when possible to perform procedures causing an opening in the skin. Things such as castration, dehorning, tagging, vaccination, shearing, branding, ear marking, tail docking, and implanting. On the prevention side, we want to try to avoid introduction of New World screwworms, so wherever possible, prevent wounds in animals, clean and cover any open wounds that you find, treat clothing, gear, and people, ensure pets and vehicles are inspected for flies and larvae, and monitor your pets, livestock, and wildlife for New World screwworms. If you have a suspicious case, it's important to immediately report it so we can get samples taken and verify whether it is a case or not. In Texas, we have a 24/7, 365 phone number that if someone calls and wants to report an issue with an animal, they can. And we have veterinarians that rotate through on call on that phone line to answer questions, refer cases to foreign animal disease diagnosticians, etc. And we take calls from producers, pet owners, as well as veterinarians. All right, so shifting gears and talking through the history of New World Screwworm eradication. So, New World Screwworm was successfully eradicated from the United States in 1966 using the sterile insect technique. And this, as I mentioned earlier, relies heavily on the fact that the female New World Screwworm fly mates only once. So, if we can introduce sterile males to the population, if a female mates with a sterile male, then they lay non-viable eggs. And then without new viable larvae, the population decreases and dies off naturally over a few life cycles. Using the sterile insect technique, eradication programs continue to successfully push New World screwworms progressively south through Mexico and Central America, eventually achieving eradication in Panama north of the Darien Gap. However, New World screwworm continues to be endemic in Cuba, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and South America. This is a nice map indicating and outlining how the eradication efforts went through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and into the early 2000s. As you can see, there was quite a wide distribution of New World screwworms in the United States prior to eradication, but we ultimately slowly pushed it down through Mexico and then through Central America. And I have the red arrow on this slide indicates where COPEG is. We're going to talk more about COPEG here in a minute, but that's about where the facility is. And then for reference, the Darien Gap is indicated in yellow. So COPEG, it is the Panama United States Commission for the Eradication and Prevention of Screwworms. It was formed based off of a 1994 cooperative agreement signed between Panama and the United States. And it's basically a production facility for those sterile New World screwworm flies. We used to have several production facilities in Mexico and the United States, but as those eradication efforts pushed the pest farther south, this is the facility that remains. They can produce about 110 million flies per week at maximum capacity. And I have a little video to show you guys. We're going to pause it for a second while I get it set up. So this video is a little 3-something minute, almost 4-minute video that walks you through COPEG, what it does, and the production of sterile New World screwworm flies. It's publicly available if you want to go back and watch it again. You can find it on the USDA's New World Screwworm website. But there's parts of it that are in English and parts that are in Spanish. So I'm going to do a little bit of translating for y'all. But we're going to let it play for a little bit and then I'll pause it and catch you guys up on the translation side.
The sterile fly production plant in Pecora was inaugurated on July 12, 2006, leaving most of Panama free of this pest and establishing a biological barrier in the eastern zone of Panama.
Esta instalación, única en el mundo, produce millones de moscas estériles semanalmente, las cuales son dispersadas por el avión en el este de Panamá, la provincia de Darién y su frontera con Colombia, creando una zona de motivación biológica que evita el movimiento del eje desde América del Sur hasta el resto del continente.
Okay, so the rough translation is that this is a one-of-a-kind installation in the world that produces millions of sterile New World screwworm flies weekly. Sorry, these are dispersed by plane in eastern Panama, the province of Darien and the Darien Gap, and its border with Colombia. This creates a biological barrier zone that prevents the movement of New World screwworms from South America to the rest of the continent.
Fly production plant operates 24/7 all year to produce tens of millions of sterile New World screwworm pupae per week. For mass production within the plant, the screwworms are fed an artificial diet and kept in controlled environments that simulate natural conditions. However, it allows for complete control over the insect's development and life cycle progression. The departments of biological security, production, irradiation, methods in development, and quality control all play integral parts and touch on at least one of the life stages as the New World screwworm goes from egg to larva to pupa and eventually fly.
Okay, so this is where it goes to completely Spanish with no subtitles, so I'm going to kind of narrate as we go along. So we're going to start with the production process. So cages are set up to house 6 liters of fertile pupae for continued production. Fly reproduction takes place in this space, and we wait 7 days for the eggs to be laid. Oviposition. After this period, the cages are moved to the oviposition area, where under specific conditions, egg laying will begin, lasting between 6 and 7 hours. Collecting the eggs. The eggs are placed on moist paper to incubate and are kept fed with a special diet that simulates a wound with warm blood. Egg hatching measurement. Egg hatching is measured 10 to 12 hours later. First feeding of the larvae is given after 36 hours of incubation and consists of 8 liters of diet. Second feeding of the larvae is given 12 hours after incubation and consists of 7 liters of diet. Transfer the insects to cages for collection in the fall-in collection room, where they will remain for 4 days. And then larvae are collected every 4 hours. Here they are distributed in trays of 3 liters of larvae per 6 liters of sawdust to simulate the natural process of falling to the ground. The transformation of pupae occurs 24 hours after collection, and the pupae is separated from the sawdust in a sieve. In the maturation room is the space where the pupae trays are moved. Here they are organized and arranged according to their maturation times. Then transferring the pupae to irradiation. This transfer occurs 5 days after entering the maturation room. At this stage, the morphological state of the larvae is verified and then irradiated and sent to the dispersal center, where it will complete its cycle until it transforms into a fly. And the complementary process of measuring the insects. This is done at the end of each feeding, collection, and sifting process to maintain growth control. All right, and that's it. All right. Okay, can you guys see my slides again?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, so as you can see, the process is actually pretty involved. Takes a lot of people, a lot of time, effort, and resources to produce these sterile New World Screwworm flies. From an economic cost standpoint, the eradication efforts that we've talked about cost stakeholders tens of millions of dollars. Today, the freedom from the pest provides about $1 billion in direct benefits to livestock producers and about $3.7 billion in benefits to the general economy annually. And the return of New World Screwworms to the United States would be devastating to multiple production systems, wildlife, etc. So this is really highly impactful for an animal disease. It's going to be very expensive and deadly if it returns to the United States. In 1935, 180,000 head of cattle were lost in Texas alone, with the potential annual cost to livestock producers and consumers in the United States today estimated to be about $540 million, and the cost to eradicate New World Screwworm from the United States today would take an estimated $1.27 billion. There's going to be some increased costs to production if it returns to the United States, including animal deaths, decreased livestock production, and again, this pest will infest multiple species. So we're not just talking about cattle losses, we're talking about all sorts of losses. There's going to be an increased need for veterinary services, an increased need for medication and insecticides, as well as extra labor and vehicle costs to make sure that we inspect premises and animals, get things treated, etc. The costs of eradication aren't just limited to the losses related to production. We also have cost of continued public education, doing research for more effective treatments, surveillance activities, sterile insect technique expenditures, as well as redirecting personnel from other disease programs and activities. All right, shifting gears to the current situation. So the kind of lead up to where we are today, in 2022, we saw an increase of cases in Panama. They used to have about 25 per year on average, and that jumped up to 6,500 cases in a year. Then in July of 2023, Costa Rica reported an infestation, followed quickly in March of 2024 by Nicaragua, Honduras in September of 2024, Guatemala in 2024, October 2024, and then in November of 2024, infestation was reported in Chiapas, Mexico. Then in December 2024, we added El Salvador and Belize to the list. Then in January to February of 2025, the Mexican states of Campeche, Tabasco, Quintana Roo, and Yucatan were added. And then between April and May of 2025, the Mexican states of Oaxaca and Veracruz. Related to the detection in Mexico in November of 2024, on November 22nd of 2024, the importation of live animals into the United States from Mexico was suspended. And then the suspension was lifted in January of 2025 when they added additional pre-clearance inspections and treatment requirements for animals that would move across the border, and then importation through AVIS-approved facilities associated with specific ports of entry were allowed. So you could only cross in New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas. And I have a map in a second that'll show you those. In February 5th of 2025, they began crossing cattle again at Santa Teresa, New Mexico. But unfortunately, with the additional detections in additional states, on May 11th of 2025, we once again closed the border and suspended imports of cattle, horse, and bison. So this is a really nice map that USDA-APHIS put out that kind of shows you the progression of New World Screwworm through the countries, starting down in Panama, moving to Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, jumping over to Guatemala, then Mexico, and then El Salvador and Belize. And kind of shows you, these are the ports that I mentioned that have been identified up at the top. It kind of walks you through it quite nicely. I really like this map a lot. Currently in Mexico, this is on the left, you have a figure showing you the cumulative number of new cases in Mexico by week, and I will say this ends at week 16. I'm pretty sure we're on week 21, 22, somewhere in there. So it's not as up to date as I'd like to provide, but that's what I have as of right now. May 19th, the most recent report was that there were over 1,500 cases with 6 animal cases with 6 human cases confirmed in Mexico, including 127 miles into Oaxaca. And then that northwest outlier is our greatest concern because there was actually a detection on a native animal, which means that we're likely dealing with an established fly population in the area. We do not have any surveillance reported for wildlife. Unfortunately, that's been something that we've asked about and would definitely want to have information on, but we do not have wildlife surveillance numbers as of right now. This is a screenshot that I took a few hours ago from the Seneca website with their most recent reports as of the 24th of May. And indicating that there's 1,676 cases currently in the states that are listed there. And I included a link in this presentation to the Seneca website if you want to follow along with their case reports. And this is a side-by-side map showing you the cases that were confirmed detections in Mexico and Central America as of March 8th, 2025, compared to the most recent map I was able to find on May 10th of 2025. And so as you can see, they had to shift the map over because we have some additional detections moving into Mexico. And I just want to point out for you all, the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, we're going to talk about it in a second. It's this narrowed portion right here on this side and right here on this side, just so you have a frame of reference. So current eradication and prevention efforts, air and ground dispersal of sterile flies has been shifted to Mexico to form a buffer zone north of that Isthmus of Tehuantepec. However, it may take 6 months to a year to establish and verify the effectiveness of that buffer zone. There are 2 dispersal centers being established in Mexico as well. Unfortunately, current sterile fly production at COPEG is currently approximately 110 million flies per week. That's pretty much their maximum. Unfortunately, it's estimated that we need about 200 million flies per week to address the current outbreak. As of May 28th, Mexico has agreed to convert a sterile fruit fly facility to a sterile New World Screwworm production. However, the timeline on that is undetermined at this time. There's some challenges to air and ground dispersal of sterile flies in Mexico. Flights to drop flies are underway, and again, there are 2 dispersal centers in Chiapas. However, we may need more centers further north as the outbreak continues. We do not have that assessment of wildlife component to this outbreak. All the case numbers are based off of livestock detections or human detections. Mexico has established additional checkpoints for livestock moving north, which is a good thing, but we are still largely dependent on producer reporting and passive surveillance at this time. So what are we doing to prepare for New World Screwworms? On the USDA side, APHIS International Services is working with COPEG to produce and distribute those flies and make sure they go where they're going to be most effective. APHIS Veterinary Services, VS, is managing the response with an incident management team. They've developed strike teams with dedicated people to assist states with response. They're refining response plans and supporting state efforts for planning, as well as identifying potential locations for sterile fly production facilities in the United States. The Agricultural Research Service folks are monitoring strain effectiveness of the sterile New World Screwworm flies, as well as assisting with planning with subject matter expertise and working on exploring alternative treatment strategies. We at Texas Animal Health Commission, TAHC, are working with APHIS Veterinary Services to provide training and on planning efforts. There's a lot of training going on right now within the state of Texas. I know all of our folks are getting trained, and we're working really hard on that as well as involved in a lot of different planning meetings. There are internal and external working groups that are reviewing policy and regulations, as well as gathering historical data and perspectives. And we're working to develop a response plan that kind of has 3 legs to it: treatment, surveillance, and movement control. We have final drafts of initial inspection and movement protocols that are in the works, and we're working with the National Assembly of State Animal Health officials for multi-state plan acceptance. We're also doing a lot of communication. So we have a lot of outreach materials and presentations that we've prepared and or are presenting. So we have an emergency management guide for veterinarians and one for producers, fact sheets. We're collaborating with USDA and APHIS on those outreach materials and presentations. And we've got a lot of people on the road giving numerous extension presentations, talking to county governments, having industry meetings, talking with other states, etc. We also have some joint information coordination and collaboration with biweekly coordination calls with multiple state partners that would be involved in the response. Because again, this isn't just livestock, right? We have DSHS on the human side that we're collaborating with, as well as Texas Parks and Wildlife on the wildlife side, Texas Department of Agriculture, and the emergency management folks, as well as the university. And then we have a bunch of industry partners as well that participate in that joint information coordination and collaboration. And then there's a NASAHO working group as well. So lots of meetings happening right now. Next steps are to have a joint industry agency meeting, tentatively set for June 17th in Austin, and continue working on outreach and collaboration needs. We have producer management information, production practices, inspection and reporting. And then on the surveillance and response side, working on opportunities to collaborate again with those other agencies to facilitate reporting, sampling, and submission, and the opportunity to get in front of extension folks so we can share awareness, provide information, protocols, procedures, and tools, answer questions, and help with surveillance. So with all that being said, we're working very hard to prepare for this. There are a few gaps in our preparedness efforts. From a movement control and inspection standpoint, we're still trying to determine what requirements other states might place on Texas livestock, presuming we are the first to be infested, right? And what requirements would USDA place on Texas livestock? From a treatment strategy standpoint, who is going to be responsible for treatment? Will those treatments be supported or funded by the government? And will they be the responsibility of the producers? Those are still questions we're working on. And then the sterile fly production capacity. We know we are at capacity at COPEG at the moment, working on those additional potential facilities. What are the alternatives to sterile fly production since we are currently at capacity? Can we use macrocyclic lactones, insect growth regulators, vaccines, fly repellents? Still working on that aspect as well. So efforts that can be taken now, we're telling people to please, please, please monitor animals regularly for signs of flies, myiasis, or secondary infections. And we are getting phone calls and investigating cases as they come up. Keep open wounds clean and covered. Treat clothing, gear, and people with proper repellents, and ensure pets and vehicles are inspected before traveling, especially if you're traveling from New World Screwworm infested areas. And if you suspect an animal is infested, don't move the animal. Definitely contact regulatory officials. We'll try to get a sample, we'll work the case, make sure it's not screwworms, or if it is, respond accordingly. So I've got a few additional resources on here. There's lots out there. USDA has an excellent website with lots of resources. COPEG has some excellent resources as well. We have multiple resources up on our website, and then there's an additional YouTube video that y'all can watch if you would like to. And with that pretty quick presentation, I'm happy to take any questions.
We'll go ahead and get started with Q&A. There's several questions here. Some of them are kind of similar in theme, so I may try to get creative and combine a couple questions. Very early on, you talked about the New World Screwworm and the causation, etc. Do you have any idea when New World Screwworm was first introduced into the U.S.? And where that may have been?
You know, that's a really good question, and I'm honestly not sure. I'd have to look that up. I don't remember seeing an initial detection date as I was looking through the history of it. It's a good question.
Okay. Several questions about the sterile flies and the production facility there. Do you know, are female and male flies separated and only the males are radiated, or do they irradiate all the flies?
I do believe that both genders are produced currently, and I think they are all irradiated. But I am not 100% sure on that. Let's see.
Somebody in the chat
That they
said
do irradiate all of them. I do believe that's the case.
yeah. Um, and then kind of a follow-on to the irradiation process. Um, do they have a means to ensure that the pupae and flies are appropriately radiated and sterile? Um, I would think they would have to have some means to make sure that they are in fact sterile flies.
Yes, I'm not exactly sure the quality control step by step that they take, but yes, that all of that research was done quite a number of years ago. Dr. Nippling and others really did a lot of research on how exactly to sterilize the New World Screwworm males. I know they looked at chemical sterilants and then ultimately landed on radiation. So those processes and procedures have been in place for decades. Um, whatever their quality control procedures are.
Okay. Regarding the most recent, I guess, surge in New World Screwworm, the spreading, um, I believe that you said in 2022. Um, do we know what possibly caused that? I mean, what triggered that rapid spread since they were continuing to disseminate flies or sterile flies? What may have caused the current spike?
Several hypotheses out there. I don't know that there's an official, this is what has happened and why. I know there was some discussion about the strain of flies and whether there were some issues with the strain, issues with movement of animals potentially. There's a few hypotheses out there, um, but I don't know that we know for sure.
Okay. You mentioned the possibility of converting the fruit fly plant to a screwworm fly
Mhm.
uh, plant. Um, Someone has asked, how rapidly can a new plant be developed to raise and irradiate the New World screwworms?
It's a great question, and the answer is probably not fast enough, but because it does take time. It kind of depends on how the facility is set up currently, and I'm not as familiar with how they raise sterile fruit flies to know just how involved that would be, and I really don't have any details on that timeline. The facilities are not simple facilities, right? As we looked at that video with COPEG, it is quite a process to raise the sterile New World Screwworm flies. And so making any facility like that, either converting or from the ground up is definitely going to take some time.
Okay. Um, Going through here. Uh, and just to clarify, they were continuing to release sterile flies prior to and while the current spread was occurring, right? They hadn't stopped doing it. Someone asked, when New World screwworm flies started spreading north from Panama, were sterile flies released in Panama and Costa Rica to slow or prevent the spread?
So, as far as I know, sterile fly production did continue, and they did continue to be released. Yes.
Okay. A couple of surveillance questions. Can you expand on any kind of surveillance that you are aware of that's being conducted in Central America and Mexico? And then also, here in Texas.
It's a good question. I believe the surveillance that is happening south of the border, I don't have as many details on that because I'm obviously not directly involved in that. But passive surveillance, checkpoints, livestock inspections, those sort of things are happening south of the border as far as I know. And then in Texas, we're definitely taking reports. If you have a suspicious case, people calling in letting us know, and we're sending off maggots to new NVSL if and when that occurs. And then I know we are working on surveillance plans for Texas and getting those put in place as well.
Okay, another question, I guess, along the lines of surveillance. Is that surveillance just for large animals, or is there a plan? Is there any surveillance for small animals? We do have some small animal clinicians online today, and I think someone's asking about small animal surveillance.
Yeah, so the Texas Animal Health Commission's mission is typically focused on livestock, but actually for New World screwworms, we have the authority over all animals that are infested with New World screwworms. So we're taking reports from everyone, small animal veterinarians, large animal veterinarians, whatever species. We'll take reports and help respond. Um, working with our agency partners as well, right? Because this spans into wildlife, this spans into humans. So working with our agency partners to respond when those cases come in, wherever they get reported. And we're trying to get the word out to everyone, right? Not just large animal veterinarians, but small animal as well, to be on the lookout um, for possible New World screwworm infestations.
So as far as reporting for small animals, if someone suspects it, is there an agency in Texas that would be the primary agency to contact?
My understanding is it is us. If you suspect New World screwworm infestations, you can call the Texas Animal Health Commission in the state of Texas. Okay. Um, Other states may set up different reporting depending on the fun state-specific entities that, everyone does it a little bit differently, who's responsible for what and which agencies respond to things. But in the state of Texas, we're taking calls on infested animals.
Okay. And
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 really, if it comes into DSHS or TPWD, coordinating, right? Wherever that phone call gets made.
all right.
That makes sense.
And I mean, we've been talking a lot about, obviously Texas will be likely the first state, but is there a northern limit to how far screwworms could invade the U.S.?
That's an excellent question. And I'm curious about that as well, especially given some climate changes, right, since they were last seen in the United States. So I'm not sure what the northernmost exposure is. I showed that one map that kind of had that nice outline when they were eradicating things, um, but I'm not sure. It's a really good question.
Okay. Regarding the suspension of importation of livestock into the U.S., um, is there any specific, trigger or event that, would cause such a suspension? Um,
Can you repeat the question real quick?
well,
My got distracted by someone who answered really well in the chat. I failed to mention that you can also always report to your AVIC, your
okay.
USDA AVIC within your state. So your state animal health official and your AVIC. So, sorry, can you
Yeah,
repeat the question?
no problem. The question was with regard to suspension of importation of livestock. Um, Is there any specific triggers that would cause that? If screwworms are identified as far north as such and such a location, that triggers the suspension, or is it probably more complicated than that?
Probably more complicated than that. But currently, the importation of cattle, horses, and bison are suspended from Mexico. So.
Yeah.
I don't know if and when that will get lifted, what the criteria are for that. I'll just go ahead and preempt that. Not up to me, well above my pay grade. But yeah, the border and importation of animals is definitely a complex situation, and nothing about that is simple, unfortunately.
Okay. You mentioned other possible treatments. If the sterile flies don't work. Um, do we know whether there are available treatments in the U.S. that would be effective for cattle or the livestock? And if so, are there any specifics you can provide?
It's an excellent question, and one we are getting a lot. And the answer is we are working on identifying those, and coming up with protocols and what we can use when, how long it's effective, etc. So I don't have anything specific to share on that at the moment, but that should be coming in the relatively near future, as we continue to try to work to put that list together. The challenge is, of course, involve, whenever you're giving anything to livestock, you have to deal with extra label drug use and restrictions and things of that nature. So that's actually a really complicated question with a complicated answer. And we are working on it, but no specifics to share on that right now.
Okay. Someone specifically asked about the New World Screwworm Disease Response Strategy Green Book.
Mhm.
Uh, is there an update plan for that?
I had meant to say that I do believe there will be updates to the Green Book forthcoming. So stay tuned.
Okay. Um, any idea with regard to the U.S. strategy uh, as far as how far the U.S. wishes to push screwworm back? Is it to Darien, or is there a goal to maintain a new barrier in Mexico? Um, I would think it would be as far as we possibly can, but I didn't know if there was a specific strategy.
I'm not sure at the current time what the ultimate end goal strategy is going to be. That is also kind of above my pay grade. Um, so I think that that's to be determined. I will say, you guys are asking excellent questions and I wish I had more answers. This is a rapidly evolving situation. In a week or two, my presentation may be obsolete, right? So do stay tuned, and know that we are all on the state side as well as the USDA side working very hard to try and address the situation, make plans and come up with a solid response strategy. But sorry, so much of it is fluid and or subject to change as the situation changes. I updated my slides literally this afternoon for y'all. That's how, like, I couldn't even finish my presentation last week. It had to get updated like today. So, um, literally day by day, the situation changes. So,
Uh, you had mentioned, that there is no surveillance of wildlife in Mexico and Central America. Um, are there any species that are more affected um, in those areas?
it's a good question. I'm not sure that there's any specific species that are more or less affected. Um, Given the fact that it's basically everything that's warm-blooded, um, that could potentially be affected. I don't know that there's a specific one that you're more concerned with.
Yeah. And here's a question that I had also thought about. We are primarily focusing on Texas. Um, are other border states as concerned? Is there a climate difference with Texas versus New Mexico, Arizona, California? Um, or are they just as concerned as we are?
I really can't speak for other states. I do know that there are those NASAHO joint coordination calls and plans are in the work, and the states are talking to each other about this. I can't speak specifically about the climate in other states, though. I'm just in Texas, so.
And here's another question that hadn't really thought of. We're very concerned about the northern spread of
Mm.
New World Screwworm. What's going on with it spreading further south? Is it
My understanding is that it's endemic in South America. Yes.
kind of similar question? Is what about elsewhere in the world? Is it endemic in Africa, Asia? Um, is it primarily just a Central and South America problem? I mean, could it be eradicated, I guess, if it was eradicated in Central and South America?
It's a really good question. I believe that it is limited to Central and South America. Um, Old World Screwworm is typically found in other parts of the world. However, New World Screwworms do occasionally pop up elsewhere, and then I saw as I was looking through the literature that there was previous incursions. Africa had an infestation and eradicated it, etc. So it can pop up, as animals, if infested animals move from Central or South America elsewhere, it's certainly possible. Um, that's my current understanding. And then as well, the extra places I mentioned in my presentation, I think someone just popped it in the chat. Cuba, Haiti. I can't off the top of my head remember the list where it is considered endemic. So not just Central South, but yeah, good
In the
point.
chat, Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic, and South America.
Mm,
And there's a lot of folks sharing links in the chat. I think that pretty much covers all the unique questions. Again, there was a lot of questions with similar themes. So I think we will go ahead and close out the questions. Definitely want to thank you, Dr. Capek, for a very good, timely and thorough presentation on New World Screwworm. Prior to, we were discussing, I'll let the attendees know, we were discussing the volume of New World Screwworm webinars that are going on these days.
mm.
It seems like I get invited to one at least once a week. And, this it's a testament to how important the topic is and how I guess concerned we should be. So I want to thank you for an excellent presentation. I want to thank everybody that attended today, and I will turn it over to Dr. Stephen Castle, the chair of our Continuing Education Committee.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Dr. Turing. Sarah, I just want to add my thanks for this timely and very good presentation. As you mentioned, it's probably changing day to day, but a lot of good resources there. And thanks for everyone for chiming in the chat and make sure we had some good answers to the questions. So thanks again, Sarah, for pinch hitting for us. And then I just wanted to add a couple of things. So we will have one more presentation, one more webinar at the end of June, and that's going to be on workforce development. This one is going to be a non-medical CE credit for that one. And then that will be our last one before the AVMA, which will be in July. So the month of July, we will take off a month for our CE webinars, and then we'll get it kicked back off again in August with some more exciting webinars. So I really appreciate everybody coming on board. This was very well attended. And thanks again for helping us out with the CE webinars. Dr. Torian, back to you.
Again, thanks everybody, and CE certificates will be out in approximately a week. Everybody have a great evening. Bye-bye.